No, Tacitan, it is over. I am over. I, Marneus Calgar, will never be a space marine.
My name is Precognition, and in this new series we'll be taking an in-depth look at the early lives of iconic Space Marine heroes, the brutal journeys these men undertook as mere children that helped mold them into the legends they would become. Welcome to Proving Grounds. This time we look at a boy from a world with a notoriously low success rate among its Space Marine aspirants. A child considered the weakest of his peers. Today, we look at the chapter master of the Ultramarines, Marneus Calgar. Within the Imperium of Man resides the 500 worlds of Ultramar, an empire within an empire, where life is moderately terrible, rather than the imperial norm of quite terrible. These worlds act as the recruiting grounds of the Ultramarines and many of their successor Space Marine chapters. One such planet is Nova Thulium, a world where life is a paradoxical struggle. Despite being a farming world that produces crops in vast supply, its people are always hungry, exporting almost its entire yield off-world. On top of this, the endless fields of grain fill the atmosphere with dust particles, causing a difficult-to-treat lung disease suffered en masse by Nova Thulium's working class. This place might look like paradise when compared to the cramped brutality of, say, a Hive or Forge world, yet for many on Nova Thulium, life beyond 40 is a pipe dream. Not so the boy named Marneus Calgar. Born to one of Nova Thulium's ruling houses, the young Marneus enjoyed all the benefits a feudal society has to offer. Emulating the famed brutality of Space Marine trials, the moment they arrived, Crixus unleashed an aggressively predatory beast known as an Ambull among the boys. Larger than an Ogren and virtually immune to small arms fire, the team of boys was left with no choice but to run. The group initially planned to escape the beast in the many tunnels under the moon's surface, but Tacitan warned that he had read Ambulls were naturally subterranean hunters. So they led it to a den of what the group of Nova Thulium boys considered wolves, the beast tearing into the pack and allowing the aspirants in training to escape. Sporting only a few minor injuries from the encounter, Marneus and company made their way to an abandoned outpost where Crixus rejoined them. Over the following months, the boys were put through a punishing series of drills and practices, honing their bodies with intense exercises, strengthening their bonds with abstract challenges, like leaving one boy tied up as bait overnight, while another guarded him from the Ambull and other predators. The trainer drilled them with dozens of weapons, from the elegant swords they were already familiar with, to how to slay enemies with rocks and bare hands, even teaching them the use of rifles and bigger guns, such as the heavy stubber the boys would take turns manning every night to keep their camp safe, while every day was a new test of survival skills or endurance. Marneus and Tacitan grew stronger, more resourceful, and yet They were being left behind. Seemingly growing far slower than their counterparts, the pair were quickly identified as the least athletic of the trainee aspirants, a title that would lead to their slow ostracization by the other boys, something Crixus did nothing to prevent, even giving the two slowest additional duties to make up for their failings. It was on one of these extra exercises that Tacitan tried to convince Marneus to abandon their friendship, claiming the larger boy could keep up with the rest if he would stop trying to aid his companion. Marneus refused, stating no Marine would ever abandon his brother. Still, they resolved to understand how such a large gap could have formed when not so long ago Marneus had been able to best most of the other boys, or at least compete with them. Asking Crixus to explain it to them, the trainer advised that they should seek counsel from the other boys and make efforts to join their group. Yet Marneus and Tacitan could not bring themselves to do it. Something about the way the other boys were slowly abandoning their nobility kept the pair away. Where once Marneus had been able to discuss scripture and works of fiction with some of these boys, now Calgar found only savages who cared for little but combat. It was hard, but relying almost entirely on each other, the pair managed to survive the training. Remaining the weakest of the trainees, they nevertheless grew strong. While yes, they'd never truly been part of the wider group, it still was a shock to the boys when they awoke the night before the arrival of the Ultramarines, completely alone. Other than Marneus and Tacitan, the camp the boys had spent months living in was empty. Tracking the other boys, the pair soon found themselves at the mouth of a cave system. One Crixus had forbidden the trainees to enter, yet the tracks were unmistakable. This was where the other boys had gone. Making their way down, Marneus and Tacitan noted the tunnel was trapped, but had little difficulty avoiding the obstacles. What they found at the bottom confused and terrified the pair of boys. The remains of a Horus Heresy-era word-bearer's starship, buried beneath the surface of Nova Thulium Minor for almost 10,000 years. A relic of the Shadow Crusade. Creeping through the ruined ship, Marneus and Tacitan found themselves overlooking a natural cavern. Though maybe natural isn't the right word, as the cavern held a perverse shrine to the blood god, Khorne. Attending the shrine were robed cultists. Among them were the other trainees, fighting, praying, carving profane symbols into their flesh. This was the source of the other boys' strength. They were filled with the berserk might of the war god. Shocked, the pair did not notice Crixus sneaking up on them. Easily overpowering the two 12-year-olds, he dragged them to the altar of Khorne. Having grown resentful at his own rejection by the Adeptus Astartes, the trainer had fallen to the call of the blood god, and now led the cult here. The trainer explained that Marneus and Tacitan were to serve dual purposes. Firstly, as sacrifices to the altar. Secondly, as a test of his budding warriors. Could they lure and slaughter their former friends? It made no sense to Marneus, who asked why not simply kill them at any moment. Crixus has had dozens, hundreds of opportunities. But it was not so simple. The altar of Khorne demanded the blood of warriors. Like a farmer raising cattle, the trainer would forge these young boys into soldiers before he slaughtered them. Besides, if Marneus and Tacitan could not fight back, it would be no test for his warriors at all. While a trio of the trainees dragged Tacitan to the altar, Marneus broke free of the lone boy holding him, breaking the boy's nose with a headbutt. Surprising the others, he freed Tacitan, and using their non-blood-mad wits, were able to fight free. It was not enough. Abandoning the idea of a test, Crixus intervened. The trainer rammed his ritual knife into the back of the fleeing Marneus, so deep The boy's chest bled. Grabbing his rescuer, Tacitan dragged the two of them over the lip of a rocky chasm, falling deep down into a pool of water. Though they had lost their pursuers for now, the damage had been done. Marneus Calgar died in Tacitan's arms. Marneus, who had been close as a brother. Marneus, who had infected Tacitan with the dream of being a space marine. Marneus, whose faith in him had been all that kept the surf boy going over the months of brutal, rigged training. For Tacitan, the idea that Marneus Calgar would never be a space marine was anathema. He had known his friend was destined for the Astartes their whole lives. He could not accept it, would not accept it. For the boy who had given so much to Tacitan, the surf would give the only thing he had. His name, his life, swearing that Tacitan would be the one to die in that pool. He assumed his companion's name, but more, doing his utmost to think and behave as he believed his closest friend would. The newly born Marneus Calgar resolved to make his former training partners pay for what they had done. Knowing he couldn't match the other boys' knowledge of the underground, Marneus headed for the surface. But he also knew they would anticipate such a move. Instead of fleeing, he ambushed a pair of boys who had gone there to cut him off. Quietly, he used his knife on the first. Taking the corn worshipper's auto pistol, he obliterated the other's head with the firearm. Awaiting the rest of his pursuers, Calgar hid near the cave entrance till a large pack of them had gone past. Heading back down into the cave system, he broke into a room the boys had spotted earlier, one that held a communication system. Sending a desperate message for retribution against the heretics, Marneus did his best to creep back through the shrine and spaceship ruins. Knowing his chances were slim, he was disappointed but not surprised when Crixus and two of the cultist boys intercepted him. The first Marneus having been run through here, the altar only needed one more sacrifice before it would grant the failed aspirant untold power. A sacrifice he would have from the former Tacitan. Calgar tried to fire upon the chain axe wielding trainer, but his auto pistol jammed, leaving Marneus to once again be easily overpowered. Knowing this was the end, the former serf comforted himself with the knowledge that his message had been received. In his mind, he could imagine ranks of local militia landing to deal out justice, or perhaps a fiery orbital bombardment raining down upon the heretics. He might not live to see it, but his closest friend would be avenged. Of course, there were no dropships of militia. There was no fiery bombardment. Instead, came an angel. In the commotion and desperate flight, a simple fact had not occurred to Marneus. With the trials starting tomorrow on this very moon, the Ultramarines were already on Nova Thulium Minor. From the moment the boy had sent his message, Crixus was doomed. Having followed the source of the signal, a ceramite-clad Ultramarine appeared in the altar room. Roaring with delight, Crixus, the Cornate champion, charged the post-human. Deflecting the chain axe, the Space Marine casually filled Crixus with bolt rounds, ironically granting the altar its final sacrifice. Its ritual finally complete, the altar ripped open a portal to the unreality of the warp. Marneus watched in horror as two of his former comrades were sucked wholesale through the portal, before tearing his eyes away, perhaps saving his sanity. The Space Marine, one Sergeant Arter, and the former serf fled as the furious warp rift collapsed the cavern around them. Marneus's training was over. The trial was about to begin. During it, many times, the former serf would come close to collapse, come close to giving up, letting the release of sleep or death take him. But one thought kept the boy going. An idea the 12-year-old clung to. A truth he would make reality, no matter the cost.
Marneus Calgar would be a Space Marine.
Marneus joined the assembled aspirants, completing their number at 300 boys, aged 10 to 12, from all over Nova Thulium. 10 minutes later, there were 260 aspirants, as the amble attacked the massed children bursting forth from under the ground. Surprised but unperturbed, the Space Marines eliminated the Xenos threat with extreme prejudice, before beginning the testing process once more. Again, Marneus was ostracized by his peers, though it lacked the maliciousness of his training group. The other boys could see he was already damaged, and simply had no wish to be pulled down with an aspirant that was destined to fail. For the boy who had once been called Tacitan, this was no concern. Crixus had failed to break him, and the savage experiences on this very moon had given him the edge they'd promised. Calgar managed to survive the deadly obstacle courses and live fire tests of the first day. 32 other aspirants were not so lucky.
Marneus Calgar would be a Space Marine.
Day 2 was more difficult again. No simple test of ability, but a series of endurance challenges, including hours spent naked in freezing temperatures. By the end of the second day, only 143 of the 300 aspirants had not.
Marneus Calgar would be a Space Marine.
Let's say, failed testing. This number was cut in half when the Ultramarines let a squad of combat servitors loose among the still sleeping aspirants. The lobotomized cyborgs viciously ensuring 71 of the boys would never fail a test again. By the end of the first week, less than 30 boys remained. Those that had survived this long started to see themselves as budding heroes. Even Marneus, an opinion ground out of them by Day 8's brutal cliff climbs. A powerful reminder that Nova Thulium had a very low success rate of aspirants. Many years, no child from this world made the cut at all.
Marneus Calgar would be a Space Marine.
As the second week wore on, the attrition rate was slow, but the boys still dwindled to 9, as they were subjected to marathon runs through obstacle-heavy tracks while enduring more live fire, this time at them, and the ministrations of local wildlife. In the end, reduced to just 2, Marneus was forced to slay the other remaining aspirant in a brutal unarmed contest, passing the final test. Leaving behind Nova Thulium Minor, he silently cursed Crixus, even as he thanked him. If it had not been for the mad cultist, he knew he would have died in the trials. There would be future trials, greater horrors, and surgical alterations that defied comprehension. But Marneus Calgar would be a Space Marine.